Okay, so I think I just said if you do have any questions, just pop them in the chat and I'll come round to the questions at the end of my talk. Um, so hopefully you will all know why you're here, and that's to hear about Cemlyn this year as we look forward to another season at Cemlyn following the successes of recent years. And yes, I took a great deal of time to find yet another pun about a talk for this year, and hence the sandwiches in summer. And the more observant of you and the bird watchers among you will notice that that's not actually a sandwich turn, but we'll come on to that a bit later on. So I thought I'd start off with what's happening at Cemlyn at the moment. And one of the really amazing sites at Cemlyn now, and they were there last week, and hopefully they'll be there tomorrow when I'm back at Cemlyn, is a really large flock of golden plumber, numbering several hundred birds. They often roost on the islands, but they do take to the air every so often, and it's fantastic when you catch them in the sunlight. And as you can see, this picture of a golden plover here in sort of approaching summer plumage. They sort of speckle and sparkle with the golden flecks on their plumage on their backs, and it's just fantastic. And they're so quiet as well. And they do it. There's so many birds, and they're still quiet. Amazing sight. Also around the reserve, perhaps the numbers starting to dwindle. We do get some nice big flocks of lapwing as well, particularly on the fields to sort of the west of the site. Um, and one of the other things that Cemlyn is particularly good for throughout the year is waders. And we had a message today. Somebody had spotted some purple sandpipers out on the headland adjacent to Cemlyn. So always a good time to look for waders around Cemlyn, and we'll be expecting to see a few more different species. And who knows, maybe something a bit more unusual than a purple sandpiper. But Cemlyn is really important, internationally important for its tern colony, and in particular sandwich terns. And I read in the paper that the first sandwich tern was seen off Penmarmara last week. So they will be starting to arrive soon, and hopefully, as I said, I'm at Cemlyn tomorrow, and I may see or possibly more likely to hear the first sandwich terns of the year at Cemlyn. But at this time of year, they are still making their migration. They're probably not that far away, heading up the coast of Wales and around the southwest coast of England, but perhaps still off the coast of Spain and France. Um, this particular bird was seen a couple of years ago in the late autumn, early winter, off the very tip of South Africa, having flown all that way in one um, short autumn. Um, and you can see on its leg, and I think you can see my pointer, there's an orange flag, as they're known, with the letters AJL. The orange flag tells you it's from Cemlyn, and AJL identifies that particular bird, and I'll be talking a little bit more about that. So that bird is down here amongst all these other birds, and although we never got to hear what all the other birds were, I'm sure that was quite an interesting thing as well. So that is one tremendous flight for a bird that's literally just a few months old. Um, Thousands of kilometers heading south. Um, but that's just one of the areas that sandwich terns overwinter. And you can see in this picture, they're light blue are the areas where they will winter. And sandwich terns from Europe in particular, so all around the coast of Africa. And we've had records of our flagged and ringed birds, particularly from sort of all the way down this part of the southern half of Africa and round to about here. We've also had records of in the Med as well in some years. They tend to be sort of earlier in the winter as well. But you do get other sandwich terns elsewhere around the world. But you can see on this picture as well all the breeding areas and all around the coast of the UK. And I'll come back to talk a little bit more about some of the other sites as well later on. How do we know all this sort of information? As I said, so this is what we do at Cemlyn, and we're part of a sort of a much bigger project that's ringing not only sandwich terns, but several species of terns to try and get an idea of where they're moving and how they move, not only on their big migrations, but on their shorter migrations they make around the UK just before they head off at the end of the summer. So you can see this bird, you can see the tool still on the ground there and the flag with the unique letters, and then on its left leg is the standard BTO ring. So often those standard BTO rings are the only way of telling anything about a bird and being able to identify it. And you usually have to wait. You either catch it, which doesn't happen very often, or you find a dead bird. These orange flags allow us to see the birds while they're still alive and while they're moving around the colony. And it's just those sorts of observations that give us this information. So this is a record of birds seen on the North Wales coast, actually at Ross Point near Colwyn Bay, uh, a couple of autumns ago. And you can see as you look around the lovely pie chart, I like a nice pie chart, all the different locations where the birds were originally ringed. So obviously a fairly large chunk of Cemlyn, and it's just over a third of the birds are from Cemlyn. Interestingly, um, a another really large chunk of the birds are from Ladies Island Lake, and this is a colony in the southeast of Ireland. And it's actually, although it's quite a lot bigger, it's very similar to Cemlyn. It's a coastal lagoon behind the Shingle Ridge with a series of islands in, and some years it has a sandwich tern colony on a par with Cemlyn. So you can see about a quarter of the birds have come from there. Another large chunk of these birds from Hodbarrow in Cumbria. Um, so that's just up the coast. And you can see that those three sites amount to sort of well over sort of two-thirds of the birds that we're seeing. And these are also the three perhaps most important sandwich tern colonies around the Irish Sea. So it's not surprising that the birds are all coming from there. Perhaps what is interesting is they're heading to the North Wales coast. Um, as you look round the list, you can see all sorts of other locations. And this one here is interesting. This is the Netherlands, and I think that was only one bird, but you've got sites in Scotland. And interestingly, you've got Coquet Island and the Farnes, which are on the east coast, obviously on the east coast of England. So these birds are possibly flying over land, but maybe also flying around the whole of the UK to get there. The other big chunk is this one. So this one is slightly different to the rest in that this is ringed adults. So Ynys Las down towards mid Wales on the coast, the birds are ringed as adults at the end of the summer, whereas all these other records, vast majority by far, are chicks, as I showed in the picture earlier on. One thing that never ceases to amaze me is how far terns will fly. And if you take a single adult sandwich tern that might live to 20, 25 years, flying to and from the south of Africa every year twice, by the time it expires, it will have flown to the moon and halfway back, which is just a staggering thing to think about in terms of distances that an animal might travel in its lifetime. But this little image also leads me on to maybe think about the bigger picture for sandwich terns and for terns from birds in Wales in general. Two recent reports that have come out in Wales. One looking at the sort of the state of natural resources in the whole of Wales. So that's looking at just the state of nature, really, the state of the environment in Wales, and looking at some of the key issues affecting sort of wildlife in Wales. And it sort of flags up a couple of the really big things that I'll come back to talk about some of them. One of which is obviously climate change, really, really important, and that does impact on the terns, and I'll touch on that later on. The other one is land use and agriculture, and although that doesn't impact directly on the terns themselves, it does impact on one of the other really important features at Cemlyn, that is the lagoon. So that part's really interesting, fantastic reading, well worth a look at, and you can get this online. The other one, which was produced a little bit more recently, is the Species in Peril report for Wales, which highlights how there's almost 3,000 species that are in peril in Wales. And as you can see from the cover photograph, it ranges from some fish to spiders, mosses, and flowering plants as well. So that gives us a really good sort of current status for a whole range of species, and it's a really interesting read for the across the range of species. So this is the situation we're in. Things aren't looking too bright and aren't too good, but uh, and within this, we have to think about what we're up to and what we're aiming to do, and how sort of Cemlyn fits into our big picture. And what we're aiming for is that nature in North Wales is in recovery, and there are sites, and the whole landscape is full of abundant and diverse wildlife. But not only that, there are natural processes that help and provide wildlife with the little niches that they need, whether it's birds, butterflies, or spiders. and it's all a little bit more wilder than it currently is, and finding the opportunities to enable these processes to occur. But also, people are thriving alongside the wildlife as well. And I'm sure everyone who's listening will know full well how important wildlife is and can be to people. Just being able to get outside, kick some leaves around, just listen to some birds. It's all good stuff and all very good for you. And we set the scene for all of this in our 2030 strategy, and our nature reserve Cemlyn all fits into that, and our goals and objectives are within that. And as I've been talking about, the key one there for our nature reserves is nature in recovery. So that sort of sets the sort of the bigger picture for us in terms of what we're trying to do. And for those of you who don't know, just a quick recap about the Wildlife Trust. We're one of 47 in the UK partnership at the moment. Wildlife Trust in North Wales is doing really well. We've got over 10,000 members, 800 volunteers across all our reserves, but not only our reserves. It's really important to remember that as a charity, it's actually volunteers who are from the governing body for the trust, and that's really, really important. We now have got about 70 staff, and I'm sure those of you who have been with us for a while will know how much we've grown over the last few years and our amazing successes. So at the moment, we've got sort of 36 nature reserves and just over, well, nearly 1,000 hectares. I do like to say 1,000 hectares, seems a nice round figure to talk about. And also, we've got Envis Ecology, who are sort of working in the wider environment with various corporate partners. One of the questions I often get asked, and so I'm going to jump the gun on this one, is how we fund all this work, and it's a job in itself. So over the last few years, we've had a very important private legacy from a member and former very active person at Cemlyn. That was really important for us. We've had funding from the National Lottery Heritage Fund in the last few years, which in particular at Cemlyn and across our coastal sites has been helping us to engage with more people in survey and monitoring work. So that's been really important. And Cemlyn provides a fantastic opportunity for that, and I'll come on to talk about some of that as well. The Anglesey Local Nature Partnership has also been really important to us, and last year they provided some funding to help us build some more tern nest boxes, which you'll see some of in some of the pictures later. Natural Resources Wales, who are funding us through a management agreement at the moment to help with the wardening of the site as well. And what we also shouldn't forget, that funding also includes all the time and materials that all the many volunteers who help out at Cemlyn and all of our nature reserves help, and that's really, really important at Cemlyn and elsewhere as well. Okay, and just in case anyone's joining us who just wanted to find out, so Cemlyn, that's where we're talking about, on that part of the north of the Anglesey coast, about 25 miles from our Bangor office. So, and this is what Cemlyn is all about. Huge flocks of terns, mixed flocks of terns, and sometimes numbering in the region of maybe sort of 8,000 birds if you count all the non-breeding birds, and by the time we've got all the juveniles in. And so a site like this is a spectacle to behold, and what you don't get from my slide is the noise. It was amazing, and it's also the thing that you can't get at all from an online talk is the smell, which is all part of being out in the great countryside. So at the moment, we're still very early in the season, but just to give you an idea of how things change at Cemlyn, last year's wardens, some of you might have met Nick and Zach, prepared this really sort of useful graph just to show you how the numbers build up. So we're still off to the left in March. And as I said earlier on, the sandwich terns are starting to appear around the North Wales coast, but numbers sort of build up very slowly at first. But then by the time we get into May, they start to sort of go up very, very quickly. So the blue line is the adults on the larger island at Cemlyn, and then you get a little bit of drop, and it sort of fluctuates a bit, and eventually it peaks when you have all the breeding birds. And last year it was just over 4,000 birds, and then at the end of the breeding season you get this very big drop off as the birds head off again on their migration, heading south again. But what's interesting at this end, what we tend to see is as the birds arrive, you'll see perhaps a few birds around during the day, and then the numbers creep up at night, and you'll get a lot more birds in the evening and at dusk and overnight. Then again during the day they go off fishing and feeding. Not surprising really, they've just flown a very long way and they probably want a good deal of food. to build up their resources. So that carries on for a while, as I say, into May. And then the numbers that are present at night and the numbers that are there during the day tend to sort of come together. So by the time you start to get into early May, you're starting to get an idea of what the colony is going to look like as you head into summer in terms of numbers of breeding birds. And you get a similar picture with the other species, with common and Arctic terns as well. Although obviously with those, the numbers are much, much lower. At the moment, we're starting the process of preparing for the terns, and one of the really key things we do is manage the water level in the lagoon. This is really important to prevent the islands from flooding. You can see it in the picture here, and I'm sure those of you who've visited Cemlyn, we have this structure on the inlet, which looks like a castle wall, and we haven't got these logs in, and that lets water in and out all year round. And that's really important for the lagoon. It helps maintain that fluctuating salinity so that the water is brackish as opposed to seawater or freshwater. And that fluctuating levels of salinity is really important for some of the very, very specialist species that live in the lagoon. So we haven't quite finished this. We're going to finish it tomorrow. It's a great job. In these many hands make light work. But yeah, it's a really important thing to do. But even so, some of the first spring tides of the sort of early summer, and particularly late April and maybe even in May, can overtop the weir, as you can see in the slide in the bottom right there. And at that point, it's really important that we then keep an eye on the water level and make sure that the water level isn't creeping up and in danger of flooding the the colony. And you might be seeing sort of the first eggs by that point as well. One thing that we've noticed over the last sort of 10 years or so is that this is happening on an increasing number of occasions, and that the risk of flooding seems to be increasing. And this could be an indication of how sea level is rising slightly uh, with climate change. But it's not just that fraction rise in sea level, it's also the increasing frequency of storms, even in the sort of early summer, which is pushing the water into the bay and consequently into the lagoon. So we do have to keep a very close eye on that, and we are increasingly managing the water level rather than just leaving it to get on with itself, because what we desperately want to avoid in this. So this happened in 1977, and this was in a previous version of this weir, which was a very much a sort of a Heath Robinson affair, and it was replaced by this much more massive and a much more permanent concrete structure. So we haven't had this sort of situation since the new weir and the tidal flaps were installed. So it's really, really important we get to do that. And again, like I said, this is a really important role for the volunteers, many hands and all the rest of it. As you can see, you also get the joy of going out in a little boat and being pulled around by staff. One of the other important jobs we do, as you can see in this picture, is put out the electric fence, and I'll show you a bit more what that looks like. But there's also, as you can see here, some of the nest boxes that I was talking about that were funded by the local nature partnership. And here you get them sort of spread out on the island in this sort of funny little star shape, with the idea they're pointed in different directions, because we're not really quite sure which aspect the terns would like. But this also avoids any one direction being affected by the prevailing winds. But we do sometimes put them in rows as well, and just individually as well, just to provide as much variation as we can, because it's these boxes that one of our special guests do like to use. And I'll come on to talk about those a bit later on. But chicks like to use them as well, and particularly for shelter from the worst weather, any of the terns will. So in this picture, you can see the sort of the finished electric fence, and this is really, really important at Cemlyn. And we're originally putting in place to try and prevent a recurrence of what happened in 2017, when we had some otters present around the lagoon during the summer. And although they probably did eat a few adults and a few eggs, it wasn't so much the predation that was the issue, it was the level of disturbance. And very rapidly, the colony dwindled until by the end of June, it completely abandoned with no productivity whatsoever. So the electric fence helps keep the otters away. It also helps deal with some of the other disturbance that we can get as well. In particular, herons, who don't usually like to land on the island. They like to land in the water and walk on. So the electric fence gets in their way. And surprisingly, you might wonder why there's a picture of geese in the middle. Geese can also be a bit of a problem. Again, it's disturbance rather than predation here. And they do like to waddle around the island and just basically run amok, standing on eggs. And we have had problems with geese, with large flocks of geese doing that. And often, well, not often, thankfully, what can happen is you can get all these three things happening at once, and that can lead to sort of desertion of the colony. And it's a thing that happens at Cemlyn, but it's happened at other tern colonies as well, where you get this combination of factors that can come together, particularly as a colony suffers from disturbance and the numbers start to dwindle. They can be very vulnerable to all sorts of predation from things you might not expect. Here's just some of the other things we keep an eye out for as well around Cemlyn. Mink, thankfully, we haven't had any records of mink, although there are records of mink on Anglesey. Stoats and weasels. I think probably one of the issues, one of the reasons we don't get a significant problems with stoat and weasels that come in, and they can swim, as obviously mink can, is that there's quite a large population of rabbits in the land around Cemlyn, and that keeps them more than happy with a good food supply. I've already talked about otter, although despite the fact there can be a problem, it is quite nice to see an otter at Cemlyn and to know they're there. I mean, if you go back sort of 15 years or so, there was hardly a record of otter on Anglesey, never mind at Cemlyn. So to have them back is actually a sign of something good happening. And obviously, this all takes a little bit of searching around and digging around and sniffing and scratching and looking at things, which I do like to get out and do from time to time. So, but this is what we're all about, and what really fingers crossed and all hoping that the season will go well. It's a thriving colony full of noise and smells and toing and froing, and Cemlyn is one of the best places in the whole of the UK really to be able to observe a tern colony. I think what it benefits from is that you're so close, but you're not disturbing the birds. It's not like somewhere like the farms when you're in amongst them, and I think that the experience is very different. Here, you feel like you're almost watching telly and watching them sort of toing and froing, all the goings on of a crazy tern colony. But at the moment, as I said, I spoke about some of the birds that are around, but one of the other species I didn't mention at that point was black-headed gulls. And these birds are also around all year at Cemlyn. And now they're sort of starting to think about nesting and they're sort of finding their spaces across both of the areas of Ireland at Cemlyn. They're really, really important. Black-headed gulls are quite aggressive when it comes to defending themselves from aerial predators in particular, things like herring gulls. And they do a really good job because, oops, wrong word, which is important because sandwich terns, as it happens, are a little bit cowardly. Although they will give it a go, they usually wait to the very last second before they sort of launch an attack or launch a defense, which sometimes isn't enough, whereas the black-headed gulls will just get up there and go for it in terms of attacking a gull. But so sandwich terns are very often found amongst black-headed gulls. At Cemlyn, the sandwich terns outnumber the gulls by sort of almost 10 times in some years. So big difference. But the black-headed gulls, like I say, are very, very aggressive. Much later probably won't be till we get into the far end of April, we'll start to see Arctic terns and common terns appearing, and they're sort of really, really the three key species that we get every year at Cemlyn. But just how important is Cemlyn? So this slide is based on some of the data that we've collected over many, many years, as you can see, going back to our first sort of wardens at Cemlyn in 1982. And then at this end, we've got last year, which is just about almost 2,500 numbers of breeding pairs at Cemlyn. But one of the things that always strikes me in this graph is how it fluctuates and how the numbers go up and down. Well, there's a general trend upwards. You can see some years it's dropped for various reasons, and you can look at some of the different reasons here. So if you're looking at this picture here, this one, which is 2023, is the impact of bird flu. This one here in 2017 is actually the year after the otters, because what we saw, although we had quite a good number of breeding birds in the year we had a problem with the otters, the following year we had it was just over 500 pairs, which was drop of down to almost a quarter of the previous year, as if the birds had thought, oh, I'm not going back there. It's a bit of a dangerous place. But then you can see that how the numbers have fluctuated through the years, but generally this sort of trend of creeping upwards, which is fantastic as a result of all the work that we've done over the years and the wardens do through the summer, talking to people and managing the colony. So the numbers at Cemlyn are sufficient that in some years it will be 20% of the UK population of breeding sandwich terns. So that puts it in the top 3 or 4, depending on the year you're looking at. The biggest colonies are on the east coast, so Norfolk um, area. But it's, as I've said, it is one of the most important sandwich tern colonies in the Irish Sea. And this graph gives you an idea of how important the numbers are. So the black line is the Irish Sea sandwich tern population, and the pink line is Cemlyn. So you can see in any particular year, it's a significant proportion of the numbers of sandwich terns breeding around the Irish Sea. But what's also apparent is how the fluctuations sort of mimic each other to quite a large extent, which is quite interesting. So you can see these dips here, but also that general trend of numbers creeping upwards. If I sort of throw in a bit more data just to make it a little bit more confusing, you can see all the other colonies around the Irish Sea. So there are, well, I think was it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It looks like there's 11 because that's the total. But this Northern Ireland one is actually a number of quite small sandwich tern colonies. But you can see there's large number of colonies all contributing to this rising population. But in amongst all this jumble, you can see the chaos of how the different colonies have different fortunes in different years. And one thing that is apparent with sandwich terns and with all terns is how they move around from colony to colony if things aren't going particularly well at one particular point. And this is some of the evidence that comes out of the ringing, not only what we're doing at the moment, but over the years that we know birds will move from one colony to another, and they'll even do that in season. So we've had sandwich terns come from Hodbarrow where they've got in touch and said, oh, we've lost 500 sandwich terns overnight, and they'll turn up at Cemlyn, and they may or may not breed depending on exactly what time of year that is. So as I was saying, so Cemlyn, the pink line in here, you're talking maybe 2,500 pairs of sandwich terns, if not more than that. But we look at the other terns that we get regularly breeding, the Arctic and common terns at Cemlyn. You can see numbers are generally much lower. And the last few years, we've seen a return to some numbers that we previously had back in the 80s. And this seems to have been sort of spurred on by a substantial increase in both species in 2020. And that's the year of COVID and the year of lockdown. And what happened in that year was that the population of terns on the Skerries off the north coast of Anglesey abandoned. They were disturbed by a pair of, they weren't nesting peregrines, but there were peregrines hanging around in the island. And what happened was, I think it was the second half of May, all the terns abandoned, and you're talking sort of 3,000 or 4,000 birds, or no, more than that. It's 3,000 pairs, 5,000 or 6,000 pairs of birds, all left, all abandoned, and a significant number of them came to Cemlyn. So you can see in this particular year, you can see the common terns went up to sort of around sort of 200 pairs, but it was the Arctic terns that really rocketed. We had around about 750 pairs of Arctic terns, which was far more than we've ever had before. And the impact of that was still felt in the subsequent years, where we still got these high numbers, which is amazing to see. But thankfully, the Skerries has recovered back to sort of its previous numbers as well. So again, you've got a similar picture of these fluctuating numbers responding to not only weather but also predation as well, and disturbance. But last year was a really special year at Cemlyn for us, and that was because of the return of breeding roseate terns. There are very few roseate tern breeding colonies around the UK, literally a small handful, and the ones that are successful, just down to sort of 1 or 2. There was a really important roseate tern colony just off Dublin Bay in the Republic of Ireland called Rockabill, and that has several hundred pairs of roseate terns breeding there. But in the UK, other than Coquet Island, you're generally talking very small numbers. But last year we had 2 pairs of roseate terns who successfully bred. Unfortunately, they didn't successfully fledge their young, but for them to have bred is just fantastic news. And that was the first time in 31 years that we've had breeding roseate terns. So you can see here just a really lovely shot of a roseate tern and everything that helps you identify it. You've got this wonderful sort of black bill and down to a very red base at the bottom, and these lovely sort of streamers at the bottom. So of all the terns, this is the one that looks most like a swallow, and the name that you get for terns as well is sea swallow, and the roseate tern really does live up to that name. In this picture, you can actually see two. There's one flying there, and you get sort of a hint, but it might be my imagination, of the sort of the rosy flush underneath when they're in their breeding plumage. And there's another one down here on the right hand side. So the bricks at Cemlyn, which sort of line the islands, are a really great place for watching the terns. And if you're lucky, what you'll get something like a roseate tern stood next to an Arctic tern, and maybe even a common tern, so you can compare all three. And then you might even get sandwich tern, so you can see how big a sandwich tern is compared to some of the other species. And Cemlyn's really great for that. It gives you a chance to sort of look at the birds and fine tune your seabird identification skills. And the wardens are there to help as well, and give them some advice. And who knows, look out for something a bit more unusual amongst the terns. One other bird that I should mention, and often overlook, roseate terns are a Schedule 1 bird. They're very rare. They're the rarest seabird in the UK, so they have like full protection under the Wildlife and Countryside Act. But also Mediterranean gulls, who also breed at Cemlyn. And last year again we had two pairs, and they were successful. They're also Schedule 1 birds and fully protected as well. So it's really nice to see. There are places in Wales where you can see several pairs, more than several, into double figures of breeding med gull. But it's just really nice to have them as a presence at Cemlyn as well. And unlike the black-headed gull, which has a chocolate brown head, Mediterranean gulls do have an actual black head, and the sort of this little white ring around their eye is quite striking when you see it. So they do stand out. They're a little bit bigger than the black-headed gulls as well. So if you can spot them before the vegetation goes too high later in the summer, they are a really nice thing to see. They're even more noisy than the black-headed gulls. Actually, they like to make a lot of noise. Okay, so as I was saying, yeah, this is what we're hoping for. Sort of this large scale tern colony with lots of toing and froing, and some data that we can collect that will add to our knowledge of the site. Um, but I just thought I'd just quickly talk about one of the things we can look forward to in the summer, and that is collecting this data. And this is one of the key roles of our wardens, who we have at Cemlyn every year. So we have two wardens as a rule, who are based sort of at Hemblas, uh, overlooking Cemlyn, and they're there to sort of provide help and information to the visitors, and to help them not only see the terns but also tell them about other wildlife around Cemlyn and the whole of Anglesey as well. And one of their really important roles is collecting data on the terns, but other breeding birds as well, and other wildlife. And if you want to keep track of what they're finding and what they're seeing, they do have a Facebook page, which will soon, very shortly, start picking up with some interesting sightings. But like I said, one of the highlights of the year is going out to check on how the colony is doing. So this is a really important bit of work, that we fully understand how the terns are doing, and how their productivity and the production of eggs is doing on the island, so we fully understand the impacts of both predation, but also things like the weather, and we can pick out any issues that might be happening. So we do this work. This is under license from Natural Resources Wales that allows us to do it. And although it's a small team, that means that we can do it as quickly as possible, so um, the birds aren't disturbed for too long. And we do keep a record of disturbance, and what happens and how the birds respond to that. I think it's one of the bits of work that the wardens have been doing over the last few years, is looking at how the activity of the terns during various periods, just to see how much they are disturbed by various things, whether that's people, whether it's dogs, or whether it's sort of planes flying over, helicopters flying over, tractors in neighbouring fields, jet boats in the park, or in the bay, or as we had last year, some kite fighting, which was a new thing for everybody involved, and we all learned about kite fighting and what it involves. So this sort of monitoring work is really important to tell us how the colony is doing, and alongside the ringing work as well, just gives us all that information to help us understand some of the impacts that they're affecting, some of the effects that are a serious concern for the term as a whole. One of the other bits of work that we can look forward to, and our volunteers on site do help with, and it's one of the subjects we've had many students from Bangor University in particular helping with is looking at feeding um, amongst the terns. And as you can see, that this nice picture of a sandwich tern coming in with three sand eels, sort of striking sort of little silver fish. But once you get your eye, and it is possible to pick out a range of species. You can't identify them all to species, but you can just get them to group like where it says here, gadoids. That's sort of cod family. But it does give you an idea of what the terns are feeding. Here's just two um, samples that were taken a week apart, and you can see that there is some variation in the diet. They do tend to take just sand eels, and they will go off and fly all the way around the coast of Anglesey. So you can see sandwich terns feeding almost anywhere in Anglesey. You know, even in the Menai Strait is a great place to see them. Off Newbury, you can see them, and even from Llyn, our nature reserve just outside Bangor, you'll sometimes see them feeding out on across Triflavan when the tide's up. So this just provides a little bit of information on what they're feeding on. And one thing that studies elsewhere have shown is that how the diet varies through the season, particularly when they want to be feeding the chicks, and they're giving high energy, high calorific food to the chicks to help them grow as quickly as possible. So, just one thing that I'd like to touch on is some of the other issues that we're starting to see in recent years. And one thing in particular last year that we noticed, and as I'm sure you will remember, last year there was a very hot period through the summer, and usually the wardens are troubled by wind and rain and sheltering from particularly the wind, because it's always windy at Cemlyn. But last year, the temperature did could create a bit of a problem for the wardens, and it was relentless for sort of what seemed like weeks on end. But the very dry weather was also interesting, and an effect that was noticed. So this picture was actually taken 2 or 3 years ago in sort of more sort of usual weather conditions, and you can see if you look, there's this scattering of particularly of these taller bushes that you can see on the island. So this is a plant called sea beet, and you can see particularly over here under the terns, it's quite widespread. There's quite a lot of it. Um, but then what we noticed this year was there was hardly any sea beet. So this is a little bit later in the season, so the vegetation has grown up, but it's not sea beet. It's some of the other species that are typical of salt marsh, things like shrubby sea blight, some of the atroplex and the orris species and things like that, and a bit of sea milkworт. So very different looking. And we think it was a combination of perhaps the very hot, dry weather, which maybe didn't do the sea beet any good whatsoever. So we went from the this sort of quite a lot of sea beet, particularly in this central area, to this when there's hardly any in this area over 1 year. But maybe combined with uh, the island's been flooded for longer during the winter, so it's some combination of things. But anyway, it was very obvious effect, and it would be interesting to see what happens this coming summer. But whatever, it did seem to make a great deal of difference to the terns, who were there in big numbers again. So they're obviously still like the habitat, still finding plenty of places to shelter and make nests, although they don't really make much of a nest. It's a bit of a little scrape that they sort of rub themselves into the ground and make a little hollow to put the eggs in. So it still seems to suit them, which is great. So we will have to wait and see what happens this year and how it varies. But alongside the very hot weather that we had, and the obvious effect that we could see on the islands, was the fact that there was a marine heat wave as well. Excuse me. And this is perhaps in the long term could be a little bit more worrying in terms of the impact it could have on prey, and either pushing prey further south or bringing in other species further north. So you could see a shift in the, the dominant species available in the sea. And then, like I say, so the terns do like to vary their diet, so they like to have that choice. So the increased temperature of the sea and its impact on prey could be quite significant in the long term. So keeping us abreast of how the this information is being collated every year could help, hopefully, signal some alarms for us, and on what to expect in the future. Um, but so the warmer weather, warmer water, sorry, in May was really a consequence of the warmer weather we were having all through last winter. You know, just several degrees above the sort of the norm. So Just give you an idea of some of the wide range of environmental factors that could be affecting the terns. Okay, so that's a lot about the terns, but I think one thing the wardens are always keen to do with our visitors is talk about what else you can see at Cemlyn. And one of the things the wardens do at Cemlyn every year is they run a butterfly transect to try and record butterflies. It's not always easy at Cemlyn because of the wind, but casual observations through the summer do mean that a number of species can be seen. As you can see here, so a number of species that were seen last year. There was a peak of 13 sort of towards the end of the summer, and this is all the common species that you might expect, small tortoise shell, small heath, small copper and things like that, and peacocks and red admirals. So nothing rare, but it's nice to see, nice to see those species around, and they're sort of surviving in some of the grassland habitats and some of the areas of scrub around Cemlyn and just outside the nature reserve itself. But also, and one of the really interesting things is how important the roadside verges are around Cemlyn for species like butterflies and providing food plants and overwintering sites as well for the butterflies. But one of the things that the Cemlyn wardens do like to do is moth trapping. And as you can see, this little graph that Zach and Nick prepared just gives you an idea how the numbers of moths change through the summer. And then the numbers of species. So you got somewhere, when was that? So the 19th of July, recording somewhere around sort of 70 species there in one night. So over the years, we've collected a list of sort of 300 different species of moth at Cemlyn. And this is one of the things that our wardens are definitely helped by local volunteers and local enthusiasts. You can see the picture on the left. So there's Zach and Nick, our wardens. And we regularly have a group of mothers who come out and help identify the moths that are collected in the light traps, which are then released early in the day, so then they're not kept for too long. But there's just a few examples in the slide here of some of the species that can be found. So down here in the bottom left, you've got an oak egger in the middle and two drinkers either side of it. This is a moth I always get confused every year, and it always takes me a while to sort of remember which one's which. But sort of it's quite a sizable moth, that one. But then two sort of very nice ones as well. Up on the top right here, you've got a gold spot moth, really nice, and then this fantastic peach blossom down here. So a tremendous range of moths, and I thought I'd show some nice uh, bright and jolly ones. I haven't shown some of the very small moths and the sort of the less colourful ones, shall I say. But they all add to sort of the diversity of moths that are recorded at Cemlyn. And one thing I haven't shown, and you'll have to keep an eye on the Cemlyn Ward's Facebook page this year to keep track of this, is the hawk moths, of which there are 5 or 6 different species that are seen at Cemlyn every year. And I think it was 2 years ago we had a couple of really nice unusual records for Anglesey as a whole, one of which was the pine hawk moth. So you do sort of occasionally come across sort of some very interesting moths. So that's a really nice part of the work that the wardens do, and one that our volunteers do get involved in and forms parts of any events or walks that we can have at Cemlyn. Stepping away from sort of Cemlyn and the work of the wardens and what they're doing here, one thing that we do keep an eye on is what's happening around sort of the coast of Anglesey and the coast of North Wales in terms of developments, and commenting on those developments in terms of how they might affect wildlife, and in particular, if we think about Cemlyn in terms of the terns, but obviously with various offshore developments, there's all sorts of potential implications for marine mammals, whether it's seals or cetaceans and other birds, not only breeding birds, but seabirds on passage to and fro. So off Cemlyn, off the headlands, you can see all sorts of species flying past feeding in it, including Manx shearwaters, but also gannets as well. And as I'm sure most of you will know, there are currently the plans for the small scale nuclear reactors are in development at Wilver, and they're starting their baseline environmental survey work at the moment. So that would be something that we will be sort of collaborating and taking part in the collation of that data, but also making sure that they're taking full regard of the internationally important site at Cemlyn, but also the other environmental impacts that could occur, and picking up on where we left off with the previous plans that came in that went to public inquiry. One of the other things we're also keeping an eye on, and I have a meeting later this week to discuss where we're at, and that's bird flu. So far, it hasn't been a very alarming winter, and the current status has gone down a notch or two. But we will be keeping an eye out for it and just seeing how things develop around uh, not only the not only Wales and Anglesey, but also the whole of the UK. As I mentioned, back in 2023, we did have a problem with bird flu at Cemlyn, which in particular, well, depending on which species you're looking at, it affected them in different ways. In the sandwich terns, it was the chicks, and we lost a significant number of chicks, not all of them, but a significant number. Whereas with the common and Arctic terns, it was the adults that were affected. And although the numbers involved were smaller, it was perhaps more significant. But they do seem to have bounced back from that. So fingers crossed that we'll sort of we'll avoid that again this year. Because what we're really hoping for is this sort of spectacle once again, and all the noise and the smells, as I've said before. But we'll also be looking out for some other things. And one of the other success stories of recent years has been the return of breeding ring plover on the Shingle Ridge at Cemlyn. And they had, so this is sort of where are we? So this is, I think, we if they're there this year, will be the fourth year we've had breeding ring plover. If you go back into sort of the 90s and before that, they were a regular feature of the birds at Cemlyn and on the ridge itself. And I think that this is just a really sort of is a credit to the wardens really and the management of visitors, and in particular dogs, that the ring plover feel safe and able to do that. Yeah, so hopefully, fingers crossed, they'll be back. I quite like this picture that one of our previous wardens, Ruth, took, because it took me a while to notice there's another bird in the background, and that's a turnstone. I just thought it was just a seaweed, but it's actually a turnstone. You can see it, so you can just make out it's orange-red legs. So that's one of the birds you do see, particularly around the shore and on some of the rocky headlands nearby. And who knows? A couple of years ago, yeah, we had a pair of breeding avocet, which was a big surprise for us. The previous year, we'd had a bird or two around at various times, and all of a sudden, we had breeding avocets. Gave the site a very Mediterranean feel, particularly the number of egrets that we sometimes get visiting Cemlyn. But yeah, you don't know. Fingers crossed, and who knows? There might be something else a bit unusual as well that pops up. And Cemlyn, surprisingly, is a really great place to see hares in the surrounding field. So it's not just the birds and the butterflies and the moths. There are plenty of other things to see, and it's a great place for some sea watching as well. But yeah, so I'm just nearly at the end now. But I thought it might be worth just sort of looking further afield about what's happening on some of our other nature reserve when it comes to birds at the moment. So over at Llynbrennig, near our reserve at Gwrthmynllwyd, um, uh, although the ospreys haven't yet arrived, we did have a report of one. I'm trying to think where it was. I think it was off the coast of France, of one of our Brennig ospreys. So that's really exciting. And we do have the webcam, and you can watch that and watch the soap opera unfold through the year, and go along and see it for yourself and meet the volunteers who help out there, which is really fantastic place to see the ospreys. We're also looking forward to, well, not me in particular, but some people are looking forward to our very early in the morning survey at Gwrthmynllwyd for black grouse. So actually, interesting enough, I was talking about osprey. So the osprey nest is just off this point here, this headland here. This picture was taken before, but you might not even be able to see it. So the osprey pole is just there. So that's where the osprey's nest. But search for black grouse and their leks upon Gwrthmynllwyd, which is our biggest nature reserve at 276 hectares. That's quite a large site. So yeah, we're looking out for those. Elsewhere, one of our what is probably one of the favourite species on any of our nature reserves, that's the kingfisher. Llyn it's been seen around already, and as we head into sort of the summer, and particularly once the juveniles are around, Llyn is one of the best places to see kingfisher. Although other reserves are available, to see kingfisher, places like Bingpool Wood, and they have been recorded at Cemlyn actually from time to time. So that's something to look forward to. But uh, as I've been sort of in talking about, I've been to my migrants, um, the terns, but one of the smaller migrant birds that has turned up recently, and I've been increasingly noticing them calling, is the chiffchaff, which is really nice to see, sort of herald of spring. And any of our nature reserves with a bit of scrub, I'm sure you could hear the really distinctive call of a chiffchaff, and you might be able to hear them elsewhere as well, sort of on your regular patch. One of the other things that we'll be soon have up and running is our barn owl cam at a secret location. Last year we had a pair breeding, and although they had 6 eggs to start with, they ended up raising 2 fledglings who survived and flew off. So that will be up and running soon, which is fantastic to see. And again, if you ever get fed up watching the television, watching some barn owls just sitting around and mooching about is always quite nice. Yeah. So yeah, just almost coming to the end. A few sort of final things to finish off with, and if you have thought of any questions, do stick them in the chat, and I'll get around to them. But yeah, so if you're interested to hear sort of any news and regular updates, you can sign up for our free e-newsletter. Comes out every fortnight. But also think about becoming a member if you're not already, and if you are a member already, thank you very much. And you can see all the sort of amazing work that you're supporting, and that's just Cemlyn I've been talking about. But there are lots of other ways to get involved, and I will post a couple of links in the chat. I'll have a look in a minute. But if you'd like to hear more or find out more about Cemlyn, if you go onto our website, you can find our Discover Terns at Cemlyn, and we have this lovely infographic, and you can click on the dots, and it'll tell you a little bit more about some of the different features of Cemlyn. We've also got some various blogs, so if you're really interested in finding a bit more about the history of Cemlyn, in 2023 it was the 50th anniversary of Cemlyn as a Wildlife Trust Nature Reserve. So we did have a series of blogs looking at the history and sort of the development of the weir in particular, but also talking about Captain Vivian Hewitt, who built Bryn Abbey, which is the large building at the west end of Cemlyn. And he's a very interesting person. And if you Google his name, you'll find out all sorts of interesting things about him, including the amazing story around his stuffed great auks. So there you go. So that's the end. And if anyone's got any questions, if you can stick them in the chat, I shall stick in the links that I was talking about. So I shall also stop the recording there.